Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. More than 2.3 million additional economic impact payments disbursed under the American Rescue Plan. Total payments top 169 million. IR 2021-127, June 9th, 2021, Washington. The Internal Revenue Service, the U.S. Department of the Treasury, and Bureau of the Fiscal Service announced today they have disbursed more than 2.3 million additional economic impact payments under the American Rescue Plan. Today's announcement, covering the most recent 2 weeks of the effort, brings the total disbursed so far to more than 169 million payments. That's 169 million payments. They represent a total value of approximately $395 billion since these payments began rolling out to Americans in batches on March 12th. There's a link to March 12th if you'd like to get more information on that. Here is additional information on the latest 2 weeks of payments, which includes those with official payment dates through June 9th. So if you haven't received your payment, maybe it's out in this batch. So here's what's included in this batch. In total, this includes more than 2.3 million payments with a value of more than $4.2 billion, more than 900,000 payments with a value of approximately $1.9 billion went to eligible individuals for whom the IRS previously did not have information to issue an economic impact payment, but who recently filed a tax return. So they are still picking up people that haven't filed or haven't got the information to them for them to be able to send out the payments. So therefore, there could be more people out there like that. If you haven't filed the tax return, if you haven't, or you know someone who hasn't received their economic impact payments 1, 2, or 3, then they're gonna remedy that by filing the tax return for 2020. Economic impact payments 1 and 2 being calculated on the actual tax return. Economic impact payment 3 not being calculated on the tax return for 2020, but the IRS having it will allow them then to process the third economic impact payment, and then they should be lined up in case we have any more economic impact payments that could well happen in the future. So this also includes additional ongoing supplemental payments for people who earlier this year received payments based on their 2019 tax return, but are eligible for a new or larger payment based on their recently processed 2020 return. So these are people that have this common problem, and this might relate to you as well, in that when these third payments went out, these third EIP 3 payments went out, they're going to base it on 2020 taxes if they have it, if not on 2019. So many people may have not have filed by the time they issued the payment. Therefore, they would have based it on 2019 numbers, which under most cases should be about the same because it's a basic calculation. But some people might have had an AGI or income limitation because there is a phase out as income goes up above a certain threshold, and many people had higher incomes in 2019 than 2020. So if you fall into this section or this category, then the remedy for that, file 2020, which if it had a lower income, may result in more of the economic impact payment that they would then send out. And I think they're calling these the plus up payments. In the last 2 weeks, there were more than 1.1 million of these, quote, plus up, end quote, payments, with a value of more than $2.5 billion. In all, the IRS has made more than 8 million of these supplemental payments this year. Overall, the last 2 weeks of payments contained more than 1.2 million direct deposit payments with a total value of $2.2 billion, with the remainder as paper check payments. The IRS will continue to make economic impact payments on a weekly basis. Ongoing payments will be sent to eligible individuals for whom the IRS previously did not have information to issue a payment, but who recently filed a tax return, as well as people who qualify for the plus up payments. So you could still, the remedy, file 2020 tax return. If we have any problems, that's generally the remedy at this point. And you might be able to get access to free software to do so by IRS. Go to irs.gov and then free file and see if you do have access for that. Special reminder for those who don't normally file a tax return. Although payments are automatic for most people, the IRS continues to urge people who don't normally file a tax return and haven't received economic impact payments to file a 2020 tax return to get all the benefits they're entitled to under the law, including tax credits such as the 2020 Recovery Rebate Credit, the Child Tax Credit, and the Earned Income Tax Credit. So if you do not normally file a tax return, then there's 2 questions you want to be asking. 1, am I required to file a tax return? which is much different than the second question, should I file or is it beneficial for me to file? If you ask the question, do I have to file, you're basically asking whether or not you will owe taxes, have a tax liability, because that's the only time when the IRS would basically come after you if you don't file it, right? You have an obligation to file the taxes if your income is over the point where basically you would have a tax obligation. Now, if you don't have a tax obligation, you may not have to file in that case, and the IRS is okay with that, but there seems to be a lot of money on the table that's left on the table for people that do not file that could have got a refund. Now, when we say refund, that includes, of course, payments that you made, for example, on W-2 wages that you would get back. And many people might think that that's the only thing they would get back and therefore don't file because it's a fairly minimal amount and filing takes some time to do. However, there's these refundable credits that actually go below the tax liability, which would mean you'd get a quote refund, end quote, which is really kind of a benefit program because it's not really a tax at that point if you were to file. And these things are increasing now. So now they're almost out of control at this point. Like there's the refundable portion of the credits have been going up. And so that's the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit are the two main items there that you might qualify for. And now even the 2021 child tax credit has increased a substantial amount, and they're even paying that out in 2021 instead of having to wait for the tax return to be filed in 2022. So therefore, you may well benefit even if you're not required to file by still filing and see if you qualify for these benefit programs. And also, if you haven't got the economic impact payments, then the remedy for that is to file the tax return. So filing a 2020 tax return will also assist the IRS in determining whether someone is eligible for an advance payment of the 2021 child tax credit, which will begin to be disbursed this summer. Again, that's another huge change. They made the child tax credit larger for 2021, which wouldn't be filed until 2022 of April, but they're going to try to prepay that again in a similar fashion as the economic impact payments and actually send out monthly checks to people based on the prepayment of the child tax credit, which is interesting. And so if you qualify for that, then again, you'd want to make sure to file the tax return because that could be a significant amount. So for example, some federal benefits recipients may need to file 2020 tax return even if they don't usually file to provide information. The IRS needs to send payments for a qualified dependent. So eligible individuals in this group should file 2020 tax return as quickly as possible to consider for an additional payment for their qualifying dependents. So in other words, you might get Social Security benefits or something like that, not need to file because your taxable income is below the threshold to do so. The IRS would have still sent out an economic impact payment or possibly 3 for round 1, 2, and 3, but they may not know about the dependent because you didn't file the tax return. They would know who you are because Social Security is a federal program and therefore they could still send out a payment, but they wouldn't be able to send out the payments that would be beneficial, that would be added to it with regards to the dependents in that case because they don't have that information. Remedy, file the 2020 tax return. People who don't normally have an obligation to file a tax return and don't receive federal benefits may qualify for these economic impact payments. This includes those experiencing homelessness and others. Individuals who didn't get a first or second round economic impact payment or got less than the full amounts may be eligible for the 2020 recovery rebate credit. So that's kind of the economic impact payments are the prepayment of the recovery rebate credit. So if there's a problem with it, the recovery rebate credit is the remedy for round 1 and 2 of the economic impact payments, but they'll need to file the 2020 tax return. See special section on irs.gov claiming the 2020 recovery rebate credit if you aren't required to file a tax return. There's a link to that here. For tax return preparation is available for qualified people, so you have free tax return preparation possibly. There's a link to that here if you want to check it out. The IRS reminds taxpayers that the income levels in the third round of economic impact payments have changed. This means that some people won't be eligible for the third payment even if they received a first or second economic impact payment or claimed the 2020 recovery rebate credit. Payments will begin to be reduced for individuals making $75,000 or above in adjusted gross income, $150,000 for married filing jointly. The payments end at $80,000 for individuals, $160,000 for married filing jointly. People with adjusted gross income above these levels are ineligible for a payment. Individuals can check the Get My Payment tool. There's a link to that here on irs.gov to see the payment status of these payments. Additional information on economic impact payments is available at irs.gov, irs.gov, the IRS website. There's also links to these items here. There'll be a link to this in the description.